We have some time to start with some questions to enjoy this great panel. So please, I invite you to participate and to formulate questions. There's a question behind. If you can, please hand the microphone.
Yeah, thank you so much for the great presentation. My question is very broad or general. Do you think that it's necessary or not necessary to reform the commercial law for getting that changes in that we need to solve in order to get a sustainable transition? Thank you.
Who is the priest again?
All of us. So you can
That's a very interesting question. And I like the way you framed it with reference to commercial law generally. The piece that I presented will be published in a book called Private Law and Sustainability. And one of the overarching questions that is posed in the book is, does private law care about sustainability? Now, for me, there's a simple answer to that, and that's no. Private law doesn't care about issues that perhaps occupy society for transitional periods, because it's focused on, you could say, structures that reflect perhaps permanent values. Now, you could say perhaps some of these can be derived from sustainability, but when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about a transition. So, generally when we speak about private law such as contract, we don't talk about a concept of a sustainable contract. Yeah? Of course, perhaps some legal wrong, some delicts or torts could be linked with sustainability. But for me, the basic question, the basic answer remains no. Private law is not directly concerned with sustainability. Of course, commercial law is more than private law. It's public regulation as well. And it's the public regulation that is concerned with sustainability. Like, we're seeing this at the EU level, mainly focused on disclosure, which is questionable in terms of whether it actually mandates action or whether it just facilitates transparency. So I would conclude my comment and make space for others just by saying, I think there's a real challenge with sustainability about how many legal domains we want to engage instrumentally with it. And the reason that so many domains want to do that, which means essentially, that what I mean by legal domains engaging with sustainability is that every area of law would devise a strategy itself for dealing with sustainability. You could say almost de novo, rather than responding to the more general requirements that are set by governments, which set pricing signals to markets and make commercial law work, to my mind, more efficiently. So I would conclude by saying there are too many hands at work when it comes to sustainability. We need better leadership from government, better signals to go to markets to allow them to do their bit.
Would you like to add something?
I think it also depends on the actors, because of course you're right that we need some guidance, but we also have actors operating in a commercial field. And so to me, the answer would also depend on how much flexibility and how much freedom does the individual actors have in these areas. How much can they push companies in a more sustainable manner? So for instance, in the Danish company law, any shareholder can propose a proposal to the company, and if it's adopted by the general meeting, then it's actually binding for the board of directors. So we have an opportunity of actors here becoming very active in this area, and also companies, board of directors themselves can be very active. But I think, just like you said, Ian, it also takes some guidance on how should we deal with this, and we can't really expect the actors by themselves trying to find their way in this jungle. So it depends on the actors, but it also depends on the guidance they're getting.
Anybody else would like to add something?
just in one sentence or two sentences, I fully agree with both of my colleagues. I think legislation or commercial law or regulation or governments are always reactive. They're always after the event. And so I don't think they should get involved. I think it is the leaders of companies and others that will make the change, and then it will follow suit. I'm also don't always think regulation is the best way forward in terms of solving everything. So I think facilitation of change and other things can come in different ways.
Thank you. Any other question, please? Yes?
Hi, thanks for...
Just a second, please, to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Elena Otero. And first of all, thanks for your presentations. And one question, I completely agree that purpose is where value generation meets impact on society, and that there's an opportunity for profit while changing society, and an opportunity for business, therefore, for profit. But I don't know exactly where the investment world is. I know it's not homogeneous. Probably it's different pension funds, investment funds, private equity. And I would like to know if you can share your views on where investment world in the broad sense is, because they are the ones really that can drive the change. They have the opportunity and the money to drive the change.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And it reminds me of a paper I published recently called Can Investors Save the Planet? And with another co-author, we reached a pretty clear answer that it's difficult for them to do that. And of course, you know, when we think about the role of investors, you know, the position is not uniform in terms of the challenges that are faced. So, you know, if you look at the sustainability strategies that investors are following, the particular challenges are present in particular sectors like energy, utilities, transport. They're not, you know, the same challenges are not present in banking or tech compared to those sectors. So there are challenges as to what investors can achieve. The other challenge that they face, and this was the focus of the paper that I published, was how do the legal duties of investors constrain their actions? And the answer to that is, particularly in the US, considerably. So fiduciary duty as a private law principle constrains the capacity for investors to make sustainable decisions in terms of portfolio construction, or even to engage in engagement with companies that is driving sustainable decision making. So I would say investors have a role to play, but they have got some substantial challenges, some of which are legal, some of which are more general.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to add something?
I'm happy to. It's interesting because you talk about investors, and of course the question of what kind of investors and which investors, because they're very diverse and of course there is a chain of you know, in the chain of investment and stewardship. So there is two parts to this, and one relates to what Ian said, which is I think the answer is not. The answer is in fiduciary duties. So a colleague of mine, we wrote a paper about stewardship code, and we then concluded that you need to change the fiduciary duties of the investment rather than actually in that, and that will change. So the constraint is absolutely spot on. So that's the first thing. But then the other answer is where I talked about earlier, which is it is not about the institutional investor, it's about who you invest in them and what message do we, as people who are invested in them, are giving them as the ultimate holder at the top of the chain. So if we're indifferent and if we you know, spread our investment very widely and don't really care, then nothing will change. So that's a much larger or much bigger problem, I think, to solve.
Thank you very much. Any other question, please? Oh, if there are no questions, I have one short question for Thomas, just for finishing, if I may. I just wrote down some ideas when I was looking at your presentation. It was I would like to know about the prospect of codification of English common law rules, because well, we are used to a more continental law system, and for us it's interesting to know. What do you think? Does it help to regulate better the issues we have discussed today? What would be your view on this topic?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, codification is something that contributes to legal certainty, and I think codification of the common law principles in the context of the new provision would help us to delimitate the scope of the common law rule and the national law implementing the directive. So definitely this would be something very positive. And Cyprus is now a mixed legal system, introducing more and more elements of continental law. And generally, many common law rules are codified. For example, Cyprus contract law is codified according to the Indian Contract Act. Yes, and this is something towards the right direction, I think, and which contributes to legal certainty.
Thank you very much. So we're running out of time, unless well, maybe if somebody else has any question or any comment from the colleagues. Otherwise, I think we can finish and close the panel. Okay, then no more question. Thank you very much for your attention.